Welcome to my piano space-time. In this video you will find my study discussion about Sergei Rachmaninoff's prelude Opus 32 No. 12 in G sharp minor. So this video might be of your interest if you intend to study this piece at the piano. However, certain considerations and thoughts might be of use for your work when learning pieces with this instrument. This presentation will be arranged in two chapters. In chapter 2, you will find what you usually could find in the other study discussions that you find in my channel. So a sort of practical and technical discussion about how to address certain technical or performing issues that you come across while working on the score. Instead, in chapter 1, I felt this time very appropriate to dedicate some time to present in a fairly detailed manner something that I would refer to as a metaphorical narrative that could in a way represent what this music possibly might express. The reason why I felt kind of appropriate to do this for this piece, I'll elaborate about that in a second when starting what I call chapter 1 of this discussion. If you have a quick look at the group of preludes by Rachmaninoff, either in Opus 32 or in Opus 23, well, you immediately can see that each of them on its own is kind of a particular, peculiar piece, in the sense that character, style of the composition, the technical patterns and musical patterns are very different from one to another. So we have an example of the great fantasy and creativity of this composer. Well, this prelude number 12, Opus 32, is an exception to this. But even more, I believe that in this case, we have a sort of additional layer of peculiarity with respect to the inherent one that is kind of common to all the other preludes. Indeed, if you start looking at the score, you will quickly realize that in particular in the first two pages that are basically 50% of the piece, we have a very unusually high number of, I think the technical term in music is agogic variations. So in simple words, variations of the tempo, of the speed that you are supposed to play. Let's see that in detail. So basically in this picture that you see here posted, you notice these orange brief lines. I simply highlighted all those indications that we find in Rachmaninoff's score that gives instructions about our speed. And taking page 1, if you count the tempo indications, you see that we find 10 of them. Going on with page 2, we find again in a single page 9 tempo indications. If you're curious, just have a quick review of the other preludes and you will realize that this is quite exceptional. Yes, Rachmaninoff is always very accurate in the secondary notes and remarks that he writes in his score beside the musical texture. It's like he wants to convey with a quite detailed manner the entirety of his musical message. And sometimes we find often tempo variation in other preludes, 2, 3, 4, even 5 or 6 times in a page in some cases. But here, definitely, is kind of going beyond any established references that we found so far. And this is not at all, I believe, musically or in character terms, a detail. Instead, is a very important aspect of the, how to say, very fabric of the musical and expressive material of this piece. Just to find an analogy, you can imagine if you are seeing a person engaged in a certain task, and every few seconds it changes the pace, the speed of his actions, going from quick to very slow to accelerating to slowing down, and keeps doing this continuously. Clearly, sooner or later he would start saying, are you feeling well? Or think about a speech that is performed in this way, with the speaker that starts with a certain pace of the explanation, and every few seconds accelerates, decelerates, moves to slower, to faster. Well, it's quite a particular thing, and in music it's equally particular, this situation. So I guess that this is the reason why I felt very important during my work of studying this piece to invest some time far away from the piano and kind of meditate about this particularity of this work, because it's very evident the risk of getting lost, of drifting away in this apparent anarchy of tempos, very unsteady and variable situations that to me suggest also some sort of uneasiness underlying. And I believe that this is, in my personal view, quite the point in this work. So, as sometimes it happens for other works, I felt it very important to also search some sort of imaginary narrative that might be possibly contained in the music. Unfortunately, I'm not aware about anything written by Rachmaninoff regarding this piece. In case you came across that, I would be grateful and very interested in reading about that. So I had to make myself content about what my imagination and ideas would suggest. Now let's go into the details about this narrative contained in the music. And as a last remark, I would say, please do not see this as a kind of real life situation with respect to the music is kind of accompanying it. No, the point is to find some kind of metaphoric narrative that is in a way expressed through the notes. So the narrative is in the music. And again, this rational frame, I think, might be a good tool to kind of take an intimate control and understanding about this continuous speed variation that we should respect, in my view, at least if we want to be faithful to what we found on the paper left by Rachmaninoff. We see that the first tempo indication is allegro. In rough terms it means fast. And in my view, I want to propose that the situation that we'll be narrating does not start when the music starts. The situation is something that started before. The music start, in my opinion, represents a specific moment in which consciousness enters in the picture. Let's be now specific. So it's night and it's raining. There is not a heavy rain, not a particular heavy rain, but this rain is tapping on the roof. And this is going on while our protagonist is sleeping. So there is this rain that is going on. But when the music starts is the moment where, in the middle of the night, our protagonist wakes up. I'm sure that it happened to you, something like this, and particularly perhaps when the rain was pouring outside. So it's dark, he opens his eyes from the sleep, and in a state of semi-consciousness, he realizes that it is raining. He hears rain tapping on the roof. And I feel it's quite matching the situation, the fact that we have this crescendo in bar 1 that is a kind of quick entering into the conscious dimension by the protagonist. So he realizes in a few moments that besides being dark, it is raining. And I want also to drive your attention to the fact that, as we said, Rachmaninoff noted down in so many places kind of maniacally indications about the tempo he wants to be performed. Here at the beginning, he just writes allegro. There is nothing said like progressively taking the speed, accelerating, something like that. And for me, it's a bit curious that I've heard a number of performances by great musicians, and I'll tell you that in the large majority, in concerts, but not only in concerts, I'm hearing instead starting playing a little slowly and then pick up the tempo in a few, say, quavers. Well, I didn't find myself much aligned with this vision, and I am a bit proud to say that at a certain point I came across a video that claims to present Sergei Rachmaninoff's own performance of this piece. And it was with a bit of gladness that I heard Rachmaninoff playing right at tempo from the very first note. And this again is pairing well, I feel, with that situation that I decided to describe in my mind about this music. And another very, how to say, reputable example about starting the piece at tempo I found in Vladimir Horowitz when he played this piece in that concert at the Moscow Conservatory in the late years of his life. Again, there is a start at tempo that I feel very much appropriate, and the fact that Rachmaninoff just wrote allegro really suggests me that this is what he wanted to do. So we have this rain, our protagonist wakes up, it's dark, hears the rain, acquires some sort of consciousness from the sleep, and then we have the entry of how to say, notes that are talking about himself in these situations. So these funerals to me are like, where am I in the darkness? And notice Rachmaninoff writes, this is not the energetic accent mark, it's the, in Italian we would say the appoggiato accent, a kind of softer accent. And he writes that accent on the second note. So like to say, don't play this like, but instead, and to me it pairs well this thing like, where am I? I'm not saying, where am I? Where am I? With a certain apprehension, right? Irrational apprehension in the night with this rain. And then the thinking of the protagonist keeps going like, and we read ritardando, diminuendo. So it's like he's saying, oh yes, I was sleeping in this lodge, for instance. And then there is, after 3/4, you see the ritardando becomes a meno mosso, so slower than the original tempo. And again, there are these notes that are on a chord that is not a peaceful chord, right? Again, to me, this is suggesting some sort of anxiety in the night. Perhaps it happens to you, it happens to me at times. The evening before you had 1 or 2 glasses of wine too much, or in the day it happens something quite stressful, annoying, or you are expecting for tomorrow something that in a way doesn't let you feel very comfortable. So there is this state of undefined apprehension at times, waking up in the night. with these circumstances. And again, there is this, perhaps he's saying, I must have had a bad dream. And then we have again a diminuendo, and going back to the fast tempo. This is quite interesting for me. And the melody stops here with a sforzato. So it's like diminuendo, the protagonist is trying to calm down, so he's saying, let's sleep, right? But there is this rain. Keeps going, right? And so this is kind of pairing up with his internal uneasiness. There is this kind of mysterious coupling between his internal apprehension and what nature is doing outside the house. And so he even finished to say, let's go to sleep, I am just in the night, that these apprehensions has a kind of kickback. He's saying, he realizes, I cannot, I am sort of agitated. And so he keeps thinking in this moment, in this way. So he's kind of acknowledging it's not that easy. Let's breathe and relax. This rain doesn't want to let him fall asleep peaceful and quiet. So again it starts, and now with the forte, notice we are on tempo, the same bar as the first bar of the piece, but we have a forte right away. So again, this apprehension is not going away, on the opposite is staying in the situation. So the protagonist is kind of saying, acknowledging forte this time, I feel so agitated. He's not saying now, let's going back to sleep. He's saying, will I be able to calm down and keep sleeping? And here I feel like, right before this chord, until here, he's at the mercy of his emotions, right? And then with this chord, his rational mind is saying, it's just rain. So it's kind of comforting himself to try to persuade him to not be drifted away in the apprehension. It's just rain. But it's not yet working, you see? So again, he's trying to say, let's try to fall asleep. And he's continuing, but this rain that keeps, tapping, nearly pounding. But this rain is so annoying. And yet it's diminishing. Perhaps it's the right time. But he's wrong, right? Because now so the rain was actually diminishing, and perhaps it happened in your life that we hear for some time, then oh, it's coming down, but then again suddenly it starts increasing the intensity, and now it develops not only in a bigger shower, but a thunderstorm start. So you hear that we have a lightning, a thunder, and notice here, very interesting to me, Rachmaninoff writes that energetic accent on the second, let's call it quaver. It's the second beat of the quaternary rhythmic of the measure, right? We have 4 beats in the measure. On the second beat, it writes the strongest accent of the phrase, and it's peculiar because the second beat is the less important in the rhythmical, development, and he would like here to be so strong. And honestly, I never heard anybody respecting this in a concert, not even Rachmaninoff himself. And even more honestly, even myself, I typically arrive here, I forget about this, and to perform this sort of anti-musical, unnatural accent right there after a chord on the main beat. It's like, once again, lightning, thunder, another lightning, even brighter, right? And the storms keep going. Now the thunderstorm is kind of expressing itself. Another lightning, another thunder, another lightning, and again the same thing. And finally, after at the 4th bar of this episode, there is another thunder, but it's kind of muffled, fading away, and even the lightning are not really there at your window, are kind of farther. Okay, so now we have 2 lines that are, I believe, the only segment of the piece that is truly lyrical in classical, or better, romantic, or even better, late romantic terms that we would expect Rachmaninoff to write often, right? So we have this melody. To me, this is not a serene singing, in particular because we have in the right hand this troubled, agitated accompaniment with a hunting bass. And with the semi-quavers even more agitated. So again, this is a lyrical moment. So what has happened? Now we are going out completely from where our protagonist was until this point, that semi-consciousness sleepiness. It's like the thunders, the lightning has waken up him completely. So now he becomes completely present to the point of singing the melody. Of course, probably not in the night in his room, but his thought, his inner talking becomes truly rational. So now he's consciously acknowledging what's going on. So this melody is for me a conscious lamentation. Like he's saying, I feel haunted by an irrational apprehension. So even what I did wrong to deserve this uneasy moment tonight, I need to rest because tomorrow I will have a difficult day, but now we have reached a kind of structural pivotal point, I believe. In fact, have a look at the next page. We have a whole entire page suddenly at tempo. The entire page, right? And I also feel that here our narrative is reaching a sort of fork in the path. So we have now to choose which side to take in the fork. And one possibility is, and this is what I will be doing, to continue with this kind of real life domestic narrative. The other possibility would be instead to cross the threshold between the real life practical world and enters into a fantastic imaginative development of things like in a fantasy story. And I will come back to this just to leave a hint about what could be that next step to develop the narrative into something fantastic. I hope not to forget that. So we are at tempo with this difficult episode now, and it looked like with the thunders and lightning we reached the maximum expression of energy by the natural elements. Instead, now something else happens. A wind starts blowing, progressively, gradually. Here we are at tempo, so the wind is blowing steadily, but we have a crescendo from pianissimo to a very high amount of energy later. And so in tempo we should perform this crescendo over 1, 2, 3, 3 lines of 2 bars each and another bar, so it's 7 bars. It's very difficult, and even technically it's quite challenging, the point, right? So we have the left hand, I think, is the wind. And the right hand, what is it? Now is no longer the rain tapping on the roof, are the leaves, the limbs tapping on the roof, on the windows, if you want, on the shutters, because the wind started blowing, and so the trees are, getting animated. Look at here what we have. We have a SFF, sforzatissimo. I propose you to have a quick look across the preludes and to find some other places where Rachmaninoff wrote SFF. There might be a few ones. I wasn't able to find them, although I didn't spend hours in super accurately checking the scores, but certainly is a very rare indication. And to me, it really serves the point of expressing that nature now is kind of blowing up in its energy. This storm is combining all the elements: rain, wind, thundering and lightning, right? So we have the thunder, and in the right hand instead the lightning appears. So I feel tempted not to spare any energy here with this sforzatissimo. And what it follows is a moment of panic. Now the protagonist that thought to have gone through the worst with that storm in the previous page, now instead is understanding that he's at the mercy of nature. Nature is in control, is dominating the situation. He can only be passive in front of what's going on. affirming herself as the ruler of the moment. And our poor protagonist in panic now doesn't find anything better to do than taking the pillow and putting his head under the pillow. So we have the theme with the grave notes, so a sinister moment, but with a piano, so it's kind of muffled, like if the pillow is muffling off the noises, the sounds coming from outside. But with the head under the pillow, our protagonist is now conscious. He's saying, this won't work. Will not be this that will make me falling asleep again. And what is going on here? Listen at the tenor. I feel it's like an intimate struggle between surrendering to passivity and instead taking some sort of resolution to do something active. And with these notes, it's like our protagonist is saying, I have to do something, but he's wondering, what is it that I should do? What would be so extraordinary for me to do in this moment? So it looks like a great endeavor in these moments, doing what? To get off the bed, probably, rather than staying there laying at the mercy of our apprehension of the natural meteorological elements. Get off the bed. That looks for a moment a great endeavor. So look how it is epic here. Getting off the bed to do what? To pour some water in a pot and prepare an infusion. It's still rain, it's just rain. And we have a pianissimo here. I don't know, in my home I have a small pot that is good to boil water for a tea, for an infusion. And you hear that after some time that the fire is on, when the water is approaching the boiling moment, there is a sort of ticking. I guess the small bubbles that starts being generated against the metal of the pot. That to me reminds, it is what these notes taken by the left hand are expressing. And now the water is boiling. The protagonist turned off the fire, so you see that boiling is quickly but progressively vanishing. The infusion bag drops in the cup. Well, I don't know if this was of interest for you. Of course, it's not a lecture. I'm not dictating this narrative, but it's my suggestion to find your own way if you want to play this piece, to kind of become intimate with this very unusual, peculiar, and I feel also challenging factor of the continuously changing time, something that is not really easy to control, to intonate and to express naturally. So finding a good narrative that fits your own imagination, I feel might be a good idea, even because it carries the practical effect of taking you away from the piano, sitting with the score on a table, perhaps with a cup of coffee, And think about that, and looking at the music and the phrase, meditating on what it might means, these peculiar things that we are asked to do here. Alright, you remember that I mentioned that at the end of the second page, when it starts this point, that we reached a fork where our narrative might take a different path. So a way of crossing the line of the real life situations, entering into a fantastic narrative. Well, I feel I don't want to elaborate in that because I believe firmly that your imagination would be in charge. So what my fantasy might suggest in the developments of any fantastic narrative for the rest of the pages might not fit your own taste. I will just leave here a suggestion as the first step. So if you remember, at this point I was saying that now, beside the rain and lightning and storms, there is another element that enters the picture, that is the wind. So this figure being the leaves and the limbs that are now tapping on the roof, on the windows of the house of the protagonist. If you want to enter into the fantastic narrative idea, this might be, the quick steps of a goblin that somehow managed to enter in the house of our protagonist. And all the rest I leave to your imagination, if you like to then explore this way of expressing the musical material with a narrative.